Welcome to The Explainer, everyone. Today, we're unpacking a topic that literally challenges the very foundation of how we understand human health. We're diving into a groundbreaking new book by Avi Peled, and it's called Psychiatry, The Case of Starting Over. Now listen, this isn't about making a few tweaks to the system here and there. No, this is a proposal for a complete, ground-up reimagining of an entire medical field. If you're at all fascinated by how complex medical systems evolve over time, you are absolutely going to love what we're digging into today. So let's just jump right in with a pretty provocative question. Does modern psychiatry need some tough love? It's a bold thing to ask, right? Because we aren't just talking about some minor everyday critique. We're talking about a massive, systemic reckoning, and it's being pushed by some of the absolute leading voices in the mental health space. In fact, that question comes straight from Thomas R. INSEL. He just bluntly states psychiatry needs some tough love. And, when someone with his kind of towering credibility in the field makes a stark statement like that, it instantly sets the stakes. It's a giant, flashing sign telling us that this medical field is facing a serious crossroads. Basically, despite all the good intentions and promise, the current framework, it just isn't working the way it needs to. Which brings us to Section 1, the crisis in psychiatry, the breakdown of conventional diagnosis. Okay, so Carl J. FRISTON points to what he calls a deep validity crisis of conventional psychiatric nosology. Now, nosology is just a fancy word for how we classify diseases, but what he's saying is huge. The very categories, the actual labels we've been using for decades to diagnose mental illness are being fundamentally called into question by top-tier experts. The old labels are literally breaking down under modern scientific scrutiny. It turns out we desperately need a much, much deeper understanding of the brain itself. Section 2, Symptom Counting versus Neuroscience, a paradigm shift in mental health care. The core operational difference here is just night and day. On one side, you have what Thomas INSEL calls symptom counting and committee voting. Think about that for a second. Historically, deciding what actually counted as a mental disorder was often just a bunch of experts sitting in a room looking at a checklist of symptoms and literally voting on it. On the flip side, we have this proposed new psychiatry, and this completely ditches that subjective committee vote and replaces it with hard objective insights directly from neuroscience. It's a massive, massive leap from subjective checklists to concrete biological science. Moving on to Section 3, Defining Clinical Brain Profiling, Rehearsing a 21st Century Framework for Clinical Care. So you're probably wondering, what exactly is clinical brain profiling? Well, it's a completely new diagnostic framework, and it's grounded strictly in data on human brain dynamics and measurable mechanisms. And the absolutely crucial thing to remember here is that this isn't just some abstract theory cooked up overnight in a lab. No, this framework has been built over 3 decades of deep clinical and academic experience. It's literally a lifetime of work entirely dedicated to anchoring psychiatry in the physical, measurable reality of the human brain. So how does it actually work in practice? Clinical brain profiling basically asks a clinician to do 3 things. First off, they observe measurable mechanisms that matter. Second, they apply what FRISTON calls mechanistic commitments. Put simply, instead of just asking a patient how they're feeling and ticking a box on a clipboard, the clinician actually ties those symptoms directly to the biological pathway, the mechanism, that's misfiring. And then third, they utilize real data on human brain dynamics. It's a highly scientific, totally actionable playbook designed specifically for the clinicians out there on the front lines. Section 4, the heavyweight endorsements, why the medical community is paying attention. Now, we have to talk about who is actually backing this up, because this is definitely not some fringe theory. It is supported by absolute titans in the field. First up, you've got Thomas R. INSEL, who was the director of the National Institutes of Mental Health. I mean, for over a decade, he was arguably the single most powerful figure in American mental health research. And right alongside him is Carl J. FRISTON, a professor at the incredibly prestigious Queen Square Institute of Neurology at UCL. He's a global authority on neuroscience. So think about it. You've got the ultimate clinical authority on one hand and the ultimate neuroscience authority on the other, and they are both throwing their full weight behind Peled's framework. FRISTON actually has this really beautiful, kind of poetic reflection on the whole thing. He says, "Over the years, I have witnessed the author's journey, often as a lone voice in the dark frontiers of theoretical psychiatry. It really highlights how Avi Peled spent years, honestly working in relative isolation to bring a real scientific revolution to a field that had been pretty stagnant. Friston mentions he always assumed Paled's vision would eventually come to life, and this book is a massive leap in making that a reality. But here is a really important point. Despite the need for that tough love we talked about earlier, Friston makes sure to point out that behind this bold title is a coherent, constructive, and compassionate call for a new kind of psychiatry. This is absolutely crucial to take away from this explainer. The whole point of dismantling the old, broken system isn't just to complain or be critical. The ultimate goal of this entirely new framework is profoundly compassionate. It's about building something way better, more constructive, and infinitely more precise for the people who actually need it. And Thomas INSEL emphatically backs this up. He declares that Paled provides a completely new framework for diagnosis, replacing symptom counting and committee voting with insights from neuroscience. INSEL has been fighting for a fresh approach in mental health care for a long time. And right here, he's officially saying, yes, a viable blueprint has finally arrived. It is a huge stamp of approval for shifting the entire field over to a strict neuroscience-based foundation. Which brings us to our final section, Section 5, Hope for Millions, the real-world impact of the paradigm shift. At the end of the day, because this new framework is grounded in measurable mechanisms, it finally arms clinicians with reliable data. But way more importantly, it matters for the patients. Like Thomas INSEL points out, this whole paradigm shift offers genuine hope for better outcomes. We aren't just talking about some high-level academic exercise here. This is a practical, on-the-ground shift that could literally change millions of lives by giving people much clearer, way more accurate paths to actual treatment. So, the core mission is crystal clear, moving the field towards a strict scientific basis for psychiatric diagnosis. That is the whole shebang. That's the driving force behind Avi Pellet's work. The goal is to just finally, once and for all, leave that era of subjective checklists in the rearview mirror and anchor diagnosis firmly in the concrete, objective science of the human brain. So I want to leave you all with a thought to chew on. What does the future actually look like when millions of patients finally receive diagnoses based on true brain dynamics rather than committee votes? Imagine a world where mental health care is measured and treated with the exact same precision as any other physical ailment. It's a completely fascinating frontier, and I really hope this dive into the source material has left you eager to learn more about where mental health is heading. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, always keep questioning the frameworks around you.